English shorthand dictation number 233, dictation speed 120 words per minute. Ready? Start. Honorable Chairman, Sir, I had come with a prepared speech to support the bill, but after hearing my learned friend, I am in utter confusion whether to support the bill or to oppose the bill. I think that the government will clarify the position. The Honorable Minister will clarify the position. Then we will make up our mind. As has been rightly pointed out by my honorable friend, if it is to invalidate the judgment of the Supreme Court, then the law cannot be said to be a good law. The pertinent question to be discussed here is the benefit of eligibility of additional quantum of pension to the retired judges at the age of 80 years and after that. The question is whether it is from the date on which the judge enters into the age of 80 or after the completion of the age of 80. That is the only simple question to be discussed, for which the Guwahati High Court had made a judgment. Against that judgment, a special leave petition was moved by the Government of India in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court rejected it. The rejection of the special leave petition means it is subject to correction. I am also saying, subject to correction, that if the opinion is correct, then definitely this is a bad law. It has to be reconsidered. That is my first point which I would like to make. Invalidating a law passed, and that too through a mandamus by the Supreme Court, is being nullified by this Parliament. To give benefit to the retired judges at the fag end of their life is not fair. It is not good enough for such a legislation. That has to be reconsidered. Sir, I would like to speak about some points about separation of powers. I am not going into the details of it. Power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely. This is the basic principle by which the doctrine of separation of powers has been debated since long. The separation of powers was discussed in the Constituent Assembly, but it was not given any constitutional status. There is nowhere in the Constitution of India an explicit provision to deal with the separation of powers, except in Article 50 of the Constitution, that is, the directive principles of state policy, where the separation of judiciary from executive is explicitly explained. Sir, I would like to quote a renowned justice who has said, "Enforcement of rigid concept of separation of powers would make modern government impossible. Strict separation of powers is theoretically absurdity and practical impossibility." I feel that this is a pragmatic version, because separation of powers is theoretically an absurdity and a practical impossibility for a modern government. I am not going into the details of all these things. The President of India is the executive head of India, and he is also having the legislative powers when he summons the House. That means separation of powers in a rigid manner is not possible as far as the modern government is concerned. That has to be kept in mind. Sir, Indian perspective of separation of powers is the harmonious balancing of powers among the various organs. The functions and powers of the three organs are well defined and demarcated. All the three organs are supreme in their own spheres as to how to act in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution. Keeping this in mind, the Indian judicial system has a big tradition of independent judiciary. Indian judiciary has played a very important and significant role in strengthening the democratic system of our country. The landmark judgments of our judiciary reform the democratic fabric of our country. The credibility of Indian judiciary was the highest once upon a time. But it is quite unfortunate to say that nowadays the credibility of judiciary is under suspicion. It is being questioned from various corners. I can cite so many examples. I am not going into the examples. Sir, Parliament is the will of the people. Hence, the legislature of Parliament is accountable to the people. The main question which I would like to pose is this: to whom is the judiciary accountable? The executive is accountable to the people of India through the Parliament. The Parliament or the legislature is directly accountable to the people of India because they are being directly elected by the people and they have to go back to the electorate for subsequent elections. So, the accountability of the judiciary has to be earmarked. That has to be defined. Now, I come to the point relating to the National Judicial Appointments Commission Act 2014, which was struck down by the Supreme Court. I fully appreciate that it was one of the landmark acts which was brought by this government and enacted by the Parliament. The entire House appreciated it. What was the accountability of the National Judicial Appointments Commission? Was it accountable to the Constitution? Both the Houses of Parliament had passed the legislation. 20 states had passed the legislation. The President had given assent to it and it had become an Act of Parliament. After it became an Act of Parliament, the Supreme Court struck down the law only on the ground that it was changing the basic character of the Constitution. What was the logic in that? That is why it was being said by the Solicitor General and late Arun Jaitley that it is the tyranny of the unelected. The Parliament and the government should rise to the occasion to protect the legislative supremacy of Parliament. So, I appeal to the government to please bring back the legislation. The National Judicial Appointments Commission bill should be brought back and it should be passed by the House. The government should have the political courage. The government should have the political will to pass that legislation again and constitute the National Judicial Appointments Commission. Otherwise, these things will go on. Sir, finally, I would like to say that 4 members of the judiciary simply struck down that law. What is their accountability? It means they are not ready to respect the will of the people. That is why I am saying that Parliament represents the will of the people. The will of the people has to be respected. Judicial reform is the need of the hour. So I appeal to the government to come out with a comprehensive legislation so as to implement judicial reforms in our country. Mr. Chairman, sir, I am thankful to you for giving me this opportunity to present my party's views on this piece of legislation which the learned law minister has brought in for passage in this house. I am a little surprised that none of my predecessor speakers have expressed any concern about the wording of this bill, the import of this bill, because I think there is some concern in the manner in which the government has brought this bill. I am surprised that every party wholeheartedly has supported this bill. Since everybody has spoken about everything else except the bill, I think I should speak a little bit on the bill and try and enlighten the House as to what the bill attempts to do.